Good morning. I'm McLaughlin, the Social Insight Lead based at SFHA. Just like to welcome you all to today's Community Resilience Response webinar. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers, Sheila Maxwell, the Community Investment Officer at Link Group, Ruth Adam, Community Regen Manager at Thenue, and Rachel Honey-Jones, the Head of Communities at Newydd Housing Association in Wales. Rachel also sits on the board at HACT and has previously been a panel member for the Welsh CIH Future Housing panel. So it kind of gives us a great opportunity to look at responses from all around the UK that housing associations have been implementing. So before we begin, a few housekeeping announcements. Apologies for anyone who was delayed getting in there. So the webinar is due to last an hour, so I appreciate that people might need to leave before that hour now. And if so, a recording of today's session will be available after the broadcast. I'll make sure I get this bit right. Attendees won't have audio enabled, but can ask a question using the Q&A function on your control panel. We will be taking questions at the end of the session, so please do so. You will also notice your control panel has a chat function. Use that if you want to share observations or thoughts with other attendees, but don't use the chat for questions in case they do get lost. I will share my contact details in that if there's anything you want to pick up on at a later date, or I can certainly contact you about. So it's a kind of formal part out the way. So really, from an SFHA point of view, we kind of frame the kind of community resilience response around how we support our members to support their tenants, not only to kind of provide kind of safe and appropriate housing, but obviously in a wider scale in terms of kind of supporting their communities. A lot of housing associations, do this through kind of extensive kind of welfare rights, or some of you guys will have community centres or run digital inclusion programmes. So I suppose it's important to consider what are the kind of benefits of doing that, in what's deemed as normal time. So I suppose you're looking at the kind of mental and physical well-being, ability to pay rent, and I suppose for a housing association, the kind of tenancy sustainability. I suppose that's important, to kind of provide a kind of cohesive and kind of positive community as well. So obviously that's important anyway. But in terms of COVID-19, I think the response of our members, it was something that really we wanted to be able to support, but also be able to champion. I think a lot of people are doing a lot of kind of great things that I think it comes instinctive to a lot of community investment staff to respond and support people. But I think it's probably now is quite a good time, I think, to kind of reflect on what that response has been and how we can kind of tailor that going forward for any kind of medium to long term planning. So what SFHA has done, I think you may have seen the kind of suite of briefing notes for a whole variety of sections. So one of the ones that we had created was the humanitarian response. So I think for every briefing note, we tried to kind of be following from that, have a blog and a kind of webinar session. So it kind of gives you the space to look at bits a bit further, or ask a few questions, or even to kind of find out more. So what the briefing note did was it gave a kind of feel for the initial focus for housing associations, and a lot of them based around the wellbeing calls, getting to know what was important within their communities and how they then could tailor their response around that. So and I think that's something that has been a massive success and shows housing associations in such a great light, their ability to understand their tenants and their relationships, and obviously something that we'd look to further develop. So also looked at some of the kind of funding information that was available at the time, and the kind of government focus for that funding, something we'll touch on in a wee minute about the Support Communities Fund. And what we also tried to do in a kind of broader way was kind of provide examples, kind of with some online resources to help kind of planning and implementation of that community focus. So the other kind of things that SFHA are doing to support our members in this is they've created a COVID response group, which the CEOs of every organisation that's our members are part of. From that, looking to kind of find ways that we can practically support them, and I think the creating a kind of added platform to enable a better application process for housing associations to the Supporting Communities Fund is a kind of practical way which we've done that. We're also involved in a kind of wider group, the Resilience Group, which involves local authorities and Scottish Government and health and social care partnerships, really about the kind of infrastructure, local infrastructure, and where best we could include housing in that. So we're looking to be represented in that. I think it's important there's a kind of formal setting for us to be able to have our members involved in I suppose a cohesive way. I think it's important that each local authority, although they'll be run very differently, their community plan will be very different, but I think it would be good if we could kind of come in at the same level. I think housing associations have a kind of wealth of not only experience and partnership, but information. I think what a massive thing that's come out of this for me is information that housing associations have, and I think, you know, I feel that we should be sharing that as much as possible, and I think housing associations obviously are keen to do that, but I think it's trying to find a kind of formal approach to do that. So we are currently in discussions with the Scottish Government around the kind of best way to do that. So we'll continue to kind of be involved in those discussions and look for, you know, any kind of future emergency response planning to kind of be as proactive and have a kind of a way to move forward on that. So following the humanitarian briefing, I kind of wrote a blog to members which gave a bit more context around the kind of Scottish Government funding, and from that, I think yesterday was communication with chief execs around the kind of platform they're providing for applications to the Supporting Communities Fund to kind of come in to SFHA to speed up the process and hopefully ensure a kind of a good response for our members. So and I know Ruth from Thenue they've already received the Supporting Communities Fund, so she can maybe touch on kind of how she's planning to use that. So I know a lot of it is based on housing associations as a community anchor organisation, how they kind of link up to existing services. I think it's important at times like this, it's not reinventing the wheel, not creating a whole load of kind of complex infrastructures. There's, you know, community groups, community centres, food banks. If that's the kind of services we're looking in the community's need, then I think it's kind of how do we link it and best? What can we do? Can we get funding that can support them? Or if there's not them there, is that where we would look to kind of provide that kind of provision? So kind of support current provisions in your area, kind of that's directly in response to the COVID crisis. So I think it's important to kind of bear in mind the kind of partnership working aspect of that. I think Scottish Government are very keen on that. So I think in terms of applications, I suppose it's important that where possible we're linking up. So I think it's about providing the provisions for the whole community, you know, not just necessarily tenants. So obviously we're looking to support our tenants, but in the communities they live. So I think another part of this, which I think you know, we'll obviously get three kind of panelists who have kind of a frontline experience of kind of planning and implementing this stuff. But I think what this shows is the value as a community anchor organisation that housing associations have in terms of the social value, the kind of added value that we provide to our tenants that they don't get from other tenures. So I think you know, it's obviously a massive part of what we do at SFHA, and we've currently kind of in the past year or so been working on a SFHA impact strand to what we do, kind of trying to help our members measure and report on their social values, the kind of impact of that. So in our innovation community, we've been working with some of our members to kind of create a toolkit around that. So that's something we'll continue to do. So if you're looking to kind of, how did we respond to this? How could we measure what we did, the impact of that? You know, I think it's something that's important that we kind of look at together. So I'll continue to be working on that, and so please do get in touch and we'll try and support you to do that. What the toolkit's doing is find the practical kind of methods to, you know, your housing provisions or your community investment provisions to measure what we're doing there. And I think we've got some kind of straightforward, without getting in too much depth on it. So I think that's important. I suppose kind of social value as a kind of definition, I think it's probably worth just touching on. The definition HACT use, who kind of do a lot of work in that field, kind of defines social value as the wider non-financial impacts of programmes, organisation and projects, especially on the well-being of individuals and communities. So I think that's kind of the main difference that we're able to do that other housing providers aren't, and I think we do that massively well. And I think, as I touched on, the information that we have on our tenants, I think it can't be underestimated. In terms of the well-being calls and how we referred a lot of the initial responses, I think it's massive. We were able to know almost straight away who was over, in the shielding categories, kind of in terms of who lived themselves that were in those categories and maybe needed kind of a bit more proactive support. So I think that's important to kind of focus on in terms of what we're doing. So as I say, the guys will kind of speak about that a bit more in depth, I suppose. Where I would say that it's kind of community and tenant welfare is paramount. I think in terms of how we plan for it, I think I've heard a lot of people commenting on reflecting after a couple of days how the response was, and I think it always kind of puts me in mind of Mike Tyson's quote, "Everyone has a plan till they're punched in the face." I think you can only plan for emergency to an extent. I think what we don't want to get bogged down with it is kind of the ability to act quickly, which I think housing associations, and I think Sheila from Link I spoke to in the kind of first couple of weeks, and they had already mobilised a kind of great response already, and I think that's massive. I think now is the time that we're able to reflect on, what have we done, what support is still needed in that area. We're looking at phoning tenants welfare calls. Are these repeated issues, or have we created solutions? Do we have a volunteering programme that's covering to pick up some people's kind of prescriptions, or is it something the housing association is still having to support? So, and I suppose that can inform a lot of your kind of applications to the Support and Communities Fund. So I think all of that's kind of massively important. So I think we're kind of lucky to be in a position where we've been proactive, and we're now can consider the kind of next steps to that. So kind of going through the panels, I think Sheila's going to speak about how Link Group kind of mobilised their initial reaction and what they're kind of planning for the future is. Ruth, as I said, has the kind of Support Communities Fund stuff. So and Rachel will be able to talk about Wales is a very similar type of kind of housing association movement in terms of kind of size and kind of social economic aspect to them. So kind of pass it over to Sheila, who kind of give you Link Group's response in a bit more detail. So thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Morning, everyone. So I will talk a wee bit about existing services that we've enhanced in line with the needs that we've identified as a result of the COVID-19. I'll talk a wee bit as well about what we're looking at in terms of reviewing services in a more medium to longer term. So I'll start with telling you a bit about Link Giving Trust. So we have had Link Giving Trust, which is a separate charitable trust with trustees made out of staff across Link. That has been in existence since about 2011. Any applications or referrals are made by support workers, housing officers, frontline staff on behalf of tenants, but it's also about community groups as well. So one of the things we did is we wanted to streamline the process and clarify some policies around. So for example, in the past we would ask you to look at the Scottish Welfare Fund first, or look at other sources of support first, other trusts, etc. But now we're appreciating that time is of the essence for many of our applicants at the moment. So we now, rather than just meeting once a week, we now meet 3 times a week virtually, and simplified the application process and looking at people's needs over the next 2 weeks. So for individuals, they can apply up for up to £200 to help with things like food, utilities, phone top-ups, toiletries, household essentials, that sort of idea. So we've made 78 awards since lockdown and distributed over £8,000 in funds. This is also courtesy of an award from Link Group to enhance the money that we already had. Also, Link Giving Trust is about recognising that we're best supporting locally based organisations rather than stepping on toes. And so we've also supported different groups. So for example, in Larkfield, we've supported Belleville Community Trust to hand out food packs to Larkfield area where we have quite a lot of housing. Also, Glasgow's Golden Generation, they helped out with an elderly couple, and then we realised that they could help out a lot more of our tenants and service users in that area. And also recently Glasgow People's Futures, who are in Postle Point Centre. So that's about making sure that we're supporting local initiatives who are already there on the ground and have already mobilised, rather than trying to go in and set up something ourselves and step on toes. So the Link Giving Trust has been a really good response and has really helped out a lot of individuals in need. So this is for tenants, but also for service users as well. So this is young people leaving care, people using our mental health services, also young people's visiting services, etc. So that's been a good example. With our older people's services, we have 12 sheltered retirement housing complexes across Scotland. They have really stepped up their phone calls so they've done over 13,000 phone calls since lockdown. That might be just a check in the morning to make sure everything's okay, but some people have requested additional phone calls throughout the day. So our sheltered housing officers are now turning into more like a befriending service as well, as helping out and helping identify what needs and issues people might have. So the community investment team did produced a support and local information spreadsheet. So because we cover so many local authority areas, we were trying to help the housing officers and other frontline staff by collating all that information into one place so that they didn't have to do the legwork to find out what was available locally, what Facebook groups there were. So that was really helpful for people. And I think that had about 113 views from different staff across the organisation in the first couple of weeks. Certainly since then, Link Living, we have befriending service and an older people's service in Fife. That used to do social cafes, attended by about 30 people in various parts of the West Fife villages and Rosyth. Obviously they can't meet in person anymore, so the telephone befriending aspect of that has stepped up. But also they now do about 30 weekly shops for people and for members, and also helping out with things like phone calls and more telephone befriending, as well as doing shopping deliveries. Our advice services based in Link Housing Association, well, they have a lot of experience and understanding of universal credit process. Obviously we're now we're getting referrals or requests for information from people who would never normally have access to advice services, who are finding themselves in vulnerable positions that they wouldn't have been in before. Maybe they've been furloughed, maybe they've been made redundant. So we wanted to make sure non-advice service staff were able to talk to tenants about universal credit process. So we produced an online training tool so that we could put on our Linkopedia, which is our internal intranet, to help increase awareness of universal credit, give some hints and tips and help spread awareness of that process. And so they were more informed when they were making these phone calls, support phone calls to tenants. Also, housing officers were then able to do direct referrals and be more informed in that referral process as well. We've noticed, as I'm sure everybody has, that vulnerability now applies to nearly everybody. We started off thinking about certain age groups, but then really everyone's been affected by this in different ways, and maybe people weren't really identifying themselves as vulnerable, but now they are, now that time has ticked on a bit more. So we've got an increasing emphasis on mental health as well, and acknowledging that people are affected in different ways. We're looking at one service that we have in Fife called Better Than Well, which is support for people affected by trauma in childhood. But the lessons that we've learned and the way that's delivered we might be able to apply that in future to other support services. Also, Link Living developed an online campaign called Campaign Sunshine to help people with mental health issues and to help talk about what different services they might be able to connect with, and also just to do some funny videos and to try and do some light-hearted content. So you can have a look at the Link Living website, or I think Facebook would be your best place to go to have a look at Campaign Sunshine and what's been happening there. In the medium longer term, we're looking at reviewing services in general, so the changing face of who needs to access what services and when. People that maybe never would have had to have thought about employability services, maybe we might focused on 16 to 24, but might need to think about different age groups, how we might develop services to meet the needs of those different age groups, different experience levels, different parts of the employability pipeline. Our employability development officer is the chair of the Third Sector Employability Forum Executive Group, snappy, TSEF. So they're the representative organisation for third sector organisations, and they're the body that engages with the Scottish Government about how the government will respond with employability services. But also looking at, rather than at the moment, the focus is very much on welfare rights and helping people getting the benefits they're entitled to. But in the future, we might need to look more at debt and money advice, because as a result of some of the things that are happening, obviously people go on to furlough. Maybe that furlough reducing to 60%, we were learning this morning as well. So it's going to push people more and more into difficulty managing their rents, managing other debts that they may have, increasing debts, increasing crisis of debt. So we're looking at that capacity around there as well. I think that's probably my 5 minutes up. So I'm happy to take questions at the end. Okay, thank you.
Great, Sheila, that was excellent, thank you. And I think Ruth's going to chat about the what Thenue's response has been. Obviously, they've community centres and have applied for the Support and Community Fund.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Good morning, everybody. This is a new thing for me, so hopefully I'll get through it fine. And there's work going on outside my house, so if you hear a really loud noise, that's why, because my flat is surrounded with scaffolding, so I am more hemmed in than anybody that I know. So I'm looking forward to the end of all this. But back to supporting communities. Interesting, when the first hint of the supporting communities came out, I was off on holiday in lockdown, sitting in my house wishing that I'd actually was away somewhere, and it came out, and by the time I got back to work, which was about 7 days later, some of my team had started doing a bit of outreach work in the first place. So we had 3 members of staff that were doing shopping and prescription deliveries to the local community, which was greatly welcomed by individuals. So I thought, right, you know, what can we do? There's money out there, how can we apply for it? And I just looked at the criteria in the application, and you know what, I've been doing funding for more years than I care to imagine or mention, and it's very straightforward and it's very simple, obviously, because it's desperate times need desperate measures, so it's very straightforward. So I would encourage people to have a look at it. Basically, it is very much targeted at community anchors, and who's more of a community anchor than a housing association. We really know what's happening on the ground. We've got lots of links and networks out there, so we're ideally placed to actually go in there and deliver or coordinate. It's a very simple application process. I think I put in, the time I got back my holidays, I think I submitted the application by the 16th of April. And I got an initial response by the 20th of April by saying, it's looking as if you're getting this money. Now, sometimes it can take 6 to 9 months to know if you're getting funding, so you will get a very quick turnaround in this. By the 27th, which was a week later, we then had the grant offer, and then a few days after that, once we'd sent the grant offer back, they deposited the first part of the money into our bank account. So it was all very quick and straightforward. So really, I suppose partly the interesting bit is what are we looking to do with this money? So there's two elements of it. There's an enabling element and there's a delivering element. So I'll talk about the delivering element first. What we applied for was for £60,000. That maybe might sound a lot to some folk or not a lot, but you have to essentially spend that within the 6-month period. So you've only got 6 months to spend it. So for us, that's almost £10,000 a month. As I said earlier, we'd started doing a shopping and prescription service for local people. We then quickly moved away from the shopping service because people were, it was getting too complicated and people were getting a wee bit demanding of us in terms of, I like those beans, but I don't like those beans. So we thought, you know, this is essential shopping, and it really is about making sure people have got the basic necessities in terms of food. So food was a big one that we put in. So we applied for food in terms of food parcels. So that's for those that can get out, those that are self-isolating, those that are unable to get down to the local supermarket. And we also are looking at food e-vouchers. So I've just registered with a company and they will give e-vouchers out to us, and then we can email them through to those that need the food vouchers. Now, all our referrals for this support's coming through housing officers or welfare rights officers, and I think that's quite important. You do have some sort of referral process in place, and that is your evidence of need, because they'll know the people and they'll know whether they're in a vulnerable situation. But as Sheila said earlier, most people are in a vulnerable situation. So these e-vouchers, what happens is people would need an email and they'd need a smartphone. So if they went down to the supermarket, they could scan the code. But we are looking at, if people don't have emails or smartphones, we will just try and get them posted out to them. So we've got a substantial amount of money for food to give away over the next few months. The other thing we have is a hardship fund. This isn't money, it's for household items. And we've already given away 2 household items that are one-off items for local tenants. An example of this is one of our tenants is a kinship carer, and she looks after her nephew who has got a bowel problem, and he soils his clothes and his bedding, and the washing machine had broken down and she was just throwing out all the stuff. Not an ideal situation. We got a referral from one of the local development trusts, and we were in a position to purchase a washing machine for this tenant, which was obviously very needed. We've got other examples of delivering food to somebody that had that was really needy of food, but it turns out she didn't even have a fridge. So, you know, giving somebody food and then they don't have a fridge doesn't make sense. We were able to buy her a fridge freezer. So we've got a small amount of money for household items. The other things that we have money for and support for tenants is energy top-ups. That's £50 per household. That sounds quite straightforward. The only problem you have, if someone's on a prepayment meter that's not a smart meter, there is an issue there, but we're working our way around to see if we can deal with that, because the last thing that we want is lots of our staff out there on the streets. We do have 3 members of staff that are out there doing all the food parcels and the prescription service, but most of the stuff we're doing is remotely. We've also got money for mobile top-ups or dongles or SIMs to try and get people online. We've got digital devices, and we've already got a lending library, which is quite helpful, but we've got a small amount of money for digital devices to try and upgrade them. My idea is that we will get them donated or refurbished so that we're not just buying a whole load of new devices, and then we'll distribute them to the people that need to get in touch with family and friends, and we will have dongles and SIMs to help them get online if they don't have any internet access. So that's in a nutshell of all the support that we're actually going to be delivering. The last thing that we've got is community grants. So we've got a £12,000 budget as part of the supporting communities. grant to give away to local organisations. They're just small grants of £500 or so. So if you're good at arithmetic, that's 24 grants that we're hoping to give away. So they might be to the local youth project that are doing activity packs for young people in certain areas. We've got a wee project doing sunflowers East End in bloom and trying to brighten up the gardens and improve people's mental health in the local area. So we possibly be looking to give them a grant away. And one of the local cafes in our area is giving away free soup and sandwiches to elderly people. So again, they would be high on the priority list for one of those community grants. So it is early days for us, but the money is very welcome. We're putting it to as good use as possible. We're looking at being flexible, and I would certainly encourage anybody, if they're thinking about applying, to do so. It's a really easy application. It's quite a straightforward process, and as long as you keep an audible trail of what you've spent your money on, and you only have to do a couple of short reports, which compared to any other organisation, that is brilliant. So I would certainly encourage you, because you'll know what's needed out in your communities, and you know how you have to work with the other local organisations and community groups to deliver what needs to be done. And I think that's everything from me, and I'll be happy to take questions when they come. Okay, thank you.
Great stuff, Ruth, thank you. And so Rachel kind of gives us a bit of a kind of wider context, you know, in terms of how Welsh organisations, and obviously Rachel's got a kind of good grasp of the kind of wider UK network as well. So thanks, Rachel.
Lovely. Good morning, everyone. Lovely to see you all, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this webinar. So as Michael said, I'm Rachel. I'm Head of Community Regeneration at Newydd Housing Association. We're a traditional housing association made up of just over 3,000 properties, and the Welsh sector is very, very similar to the Scottish sector in terms of how the language that we use, the barriers that we face being smaller organisations, a lot of the stuff that comes across the border from England we find is quite difficult for us to replicate because of our limited resources, and I know that's also something that yourselves find as well. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a brief overview in terms of what we're doing as an organisation, but also what's happening in the wider context. So our organisation now has decided to actually go on lockdown a week before national lockdown happened. That was because of the information that was coming out of Welsh Government. Welsh Government, to be honest with you, very similar to your wonderful government up there, have been really, really supportive. I'm absolutely loving Nicola Sturgeon at the moment, by the way. I'm loving the way that she's talking about Westminster, but I'll leave politics out of it. So we were getting a lot of noise from our Welsh Government counterparts in terms of what was going to happen. So we went on lockdown on the 16th of March, and that was just an organisational choice, but we knew it was going to happen, so we wanted to iron out any teething issues right at the beginning, so that allowed us to do so. Obviously, having a team of community workers who, by nature of their job, are meant to be face-to-face with communities, I had to come up quite quickly with something that we would need to do in terms of supporting the organisation, supporting the bottom line. So I decided once I had it agreed with the senior management team, that we would start our welfare calls. And something that I've been wanting to do for the whole 4 years I've been at Newydd is update our equality and diversity information, because our data, and please keep this quiet, is not the greatest. And that's something that this whole experience has really shown me. I run annual reports on our equality and diversity data, and although it's meant to be captured at sign up of tenancy, it hasn't been. So we aren't able to deliver our services to our tenants to the best of our ability, because we may not actually know that they have additional support needs. So what we've done is we've combined the welfare calls with equality and diversity cleansing data. We've got 4,700 tenants. Obviously I said we have just over 3,000 properties. So about 1,600 of those are joint tenancies. I'm also the designated safeguarding lead for the association, so I was really conscious that if we were talking to one household, we may be talking to a perpetrator or a victim. Therefore, if the individual needed additional support and a perpetrator was in the vicinity, or the perpetrator was the one that answered the phone, they would say, yeah, everything's fine. So I was very conscious and ensured that my team spoke to every single tenant so that we could potentially iron that out. The way that I did that is we implemented the Ask Angela initiative, which is used in pubs and clubs in the hospitality industry. And essentially we said, are you having any issues at home in terms of abuse, or are you feeling scared? If you are, can you say, no, that's fine, thank you very much. That then allowed us to actually highlight anyone that may need additional support that had not had any contact from any other services. So that's actually been very beneficial. And we have had a few come through and been able to support individuals through that. When we pulled the information off our housing management system to be able to make these welfare calls, we then broke it up amongst the team of, there's 10 of us, so we did that. But as with everything that you do very quickly, and as you said, Michael, earlier, you know, if you plan for a crisis, then it's never going to happen. We have had to change what we do on a daily, if not hourly basis. So when we pulled that information off, that we actually found that joint tenancies were going onto different spreadsheets. So one of us could be calling tenant A, and then tenant B, who lives in the same household, would be on a different spreadsheet. So it was a bit of a nightmare navigating that. So we had to spend some time sorting that out. We started then the welfare calls exactly a week after our lockdown and the day of the UK national lockdown on the 23rd. We filtered it by area because we work across 11 local authorities, and by age, so in terms of vulnerability categories. Also at the same time, I was then in touch with, sorry, that's my dog and the postman. We were also in touch with, I was in touch with the local authority leads because they were receiving the NHS shielded list. So the NHS shielded list in Wales is the letter that was sent out by Public Health Wales, which identified individuals as needing to be self-isolating for at least the 12-week period due to underlying health conditions. The Public Health Wales gave that list to the local authorities, and then we had about a week of back and forth discussions about how that information could be shared with the housing providers. Again, as I said, we work across 11 local authorities, so each individual local authority has had a different process in which to be able to share that data. But one of our local authority partners was extremely forward-thinking and created a COVID core group right from the beginning of the crisis. And they sought advice and guidance from Welsh Government, in which the Welsh Government actually said in these circumstances it could be more harmful not to share health and care information than to share it. That was cleared by the Information Commissioner's Office, and that was really beneficial. So we sent a list of our addresses to the local authority. They then sent us a list of individuals that were shielded within that local authority. So within that local authority, we had 65 individuals who were shielded and 22 who required the additional support that that was outlined earlier in the webinar. Another local authority that I'm working within, they actually sent us the whole shielded list, and then I had to painstakingly take 12 hours on a Friday evening going through every single line to then cross-reference it with our housing management system to find out whether or not they were our tenants. That I would definitely not recommend. So that was really hard work, but something that it really did highlight to me is how, as housing providers, we have no data standards whatsoever in terms of when we're working with partners across local authorities. So one local authority, for example, wanted us to provide a unique GIS number. It's not something that we have within our housing management system. Another local authority simply just wanted postcodes. And then when we're looking at things such as addresses, and when I was having to do the cross-referencing, because they've all been manually entered at some point in time, where it says address line 1, an individual might have put the number 7 and address line 2, the street name, whereas somebody else might have, in address line 1, put 7 street name. So you couldn't even filter it in terms of Excel and actually try and figure out what was matching. So that was a really big issue for us, and that's definitely something that I think I'm quite passionate now about us moving forward. If there's something that we're going to learn from this crisis, is that we need to, from all providers, local authorities, social services, third sector, public sector, private sector, we need to have some form of standard way of capturing that data and then being able to, when it is being able to be shared, that we can do that. So that's kind of like the welfare side of things that we've been doing. In terms of what we've been doing outside of the welfare space, in terms of the welfare calls, we've got a lottery funded project called the Happy Project. It's a 5-year program. I think we're into year 3 or just going into year 4 now, and it's a health and well-being project. Again, obviously with it usually meant to be within the community, the team had to very quickly figure out how to be able to deliver these services and still continue to meet our targets. So it went digital. So we went from 200 and something page likes prior to lockdown. We're now on 2,595 likes and 2,929 follows. And what the team have done is they've used our supply chain that we usually use within our day-to-day work, and we've got them to go digital. So we've got them to actually record videos. So we've got fitness classes, we've got sing-along classes, we've got Pilates, self-care such as how to do a massage and facial at home, gardening, we've got magic tricks for the kids, we've got absolutely loads of stuff. I'm blown away by how amazing the team have been in getting our providers to go online. The other reason we wanted to do this is we are very conscious in Wales about ensuring that we spend our pound locally. So we always try and use local providers, small businesses to support SMEs. The majority of our providers for the Happy Project, it's HAPI, I'll put the link in the comments afterwards to the Facebook page if anyone's interested, is most of them are one-man bands or one-woman bands. So as a result of that, and as a result of lockdown, they've had their income stream completely decimated. So we wanted to make sure that we were still able to continue to pay them, continue to use their services to possibly help them through this period. And they've all been fantastic, and they've really given us 110% with the videos that they've sent through. I think that's about it for me for now. The only other thing obviously was also very similar to what Ruth was saying in terms of digital with the loan IT equipment. And we're handing out tablets which are enabled with SIM cards so people can get online, and then we're also socially distancing, giving support and sending out how-to guides and things like that. So I think that's enough rambling from me. Is that okay, Mike? Is there anything else you wanted me to mention?
No, that's great. That's great. Maybe bring in the questions. So I think we've got a question in the question and answer section. Also, have spoken to members through the week and have kind of got a couple of questions that I'll maybe try and kind of get some take on. So I think Carol Gemmell had asked, is the Support and Communities Fund still open for applications? So yes, I kind of referred to it earlier, maybe wasn't overly clear. So we have spoken to each chief exec of SFHA members to confirm that applications are still open and can be applied for through ourselves. So if anybody would like more information about that, or you know, there's kind of expressions of interest kind of being welcomed at the moment. So it certainly is, and I know housing associations have applied for it themselves, and some like Ruth have already done so. So yeah, one of the things I was going to say, kind of linked in with some of the stuff I think Rachel touched on there, a kind of question that came up during the week at the HACT Centre for Excellence in Community Investment, which I know some of you guys have been going to the Scottish network of. So around the kind of data that we're receiving, and Rachel was saying, you know, at times we could maybe collate that better. But what had been interesting, a few people has been, yeah, they've got the data of who they're called for wellbeing calls, but what are we doing with that? Are we keeping, you know, number of referrals? Are we keeping what happened with those referrals? How are we storing that? Are we keeping them on a CRM? You know, I suppose what my take on that was linked to earlier on, kind of social value, the toolkit that SFHA are looking to kind of develop. I think it's interesting to, you know, we were looking to kind of measure the value of the core functions of a housing association. But I think it's now important for us to kind of slightly repurpose that. So I know Lorna has been in discussion with the COVID response group and kind of what we will look to capture for SFHA. But I think in conjunction with the Centre for Excellence, they've got some kind of shared measures in terms of wellbeing calls and the kind of offshoot of that. And so it was really just kind of to ask, particularly kind of Rachel, Sheila, or Ruth, how are you guys do you have a formal way of kind of keeping track of that to then report on? And it'd be interesting to kind of tie in with some of that and see how we as a kind of member association could kind of learn how we could promote that through our membership, or we could even start measuring that on behalf of the sector slightly.
I could maybe answer on behalf of Thenue. We do have like a contacts management database that our housing staff will use. So when they're doing any contacts, they will update that so that we've got an understanding, a more of a complete picture of what we've done with that individual. Of course, things have changed quite considerably since this pandemic has landed upon us. And there has been we have been using other like spreadsheets and things so that people can actually collate the data in certain communities or certain areas, that we would then move that up back down to the housing staff so that they can update the contacts. Sorry, my cat's having a hairy fit now. They can update the contacts and make sure that we've got a good understanding of where the support needs are for each individual person.
And is that easily done? Is it, is that kind of to and fro so you could pull that information out quite quickly?
Yeah, with any of things like that, they always have glitches and different people set things up differently. And I think it's just a learning process. But as long as you're always vigilant or keeping it in the front of your mind that you have, how do you collect that information, and if you need to report back on it or what you're going to do with it. We're quite good at collecting information, but what we're actually going to do with it and how does that form our future services or future projects or delivery. I think that's really important.
At Link, we've been using a combination of our standard housing management system, or CRM, but also enhancing with spreadsheets, partly for technical reasons, but also because sometimes the system is not set up to record the things that we now want to know and have more focus upon. Also, we've been enhancing, I've been doing work around business intelligence tools in general, and really acknowledging what Rachel's saying as well, is that we gather a lot of information, but we can really improve how we then use that information and use that information to inform our service provision. So we have used for a while Community Insight, which is the HACT tool, and that's been helpful in terms of where we don't have the data or we have data gaps about our tenants. We use the national data that's there and the British Red Cross Vulnerability Index, looking at things like who's making claims because of respiratory illness, who's making DWP claims because of various health conditions or age groups of houses, that sort of idea. So where we might have gaps, okay, it might not be explicitly about our tenants, but it's the next best option after that. So it's about looking at where the gaps are that we have and where we can get the next best source of information about that, because also Link covers 23 local authority areas. We have very different needs and issues and profiles and demographics and protected characteristics, etc., all around Scotland. So that's when these types of tools and that information is really important.
Yeah, just to echo exactly what Sheila said, we have been doing the same in terms of using the Community Insight tool. So the annual equality and diversity report that I was speaking about earlier, what I try and do is I will analyse that up against the national statistics just to ensure that we're not adversely using our services, like adversely affecting anyone with protected characteristics. In terms of capturing data during this crisis, similar to Ruth, we've been using our housing management system and then also supplementing it with spreadsheets for exactly the same reasons as Sheila outlined, in terms of we just aren't able to capture that information within our housing management system. It's quite clunky. It doesn't really have sort of like a welfare or support section that we're able to add into, but also in terms of subject access requests. We obviously need to be careful in terms of what information is stored where and who has access to it. So essentially our housing management system, anyone who's working within customer services would be able to see anything within that file. However, that's not some of the information that we hold is quite sensitive, and therefore we wouldn't necessarily want those individuals to be able to access that information. Same goes for safeguarding. So we've got different systems for that side of it. In terms of capturing the impact of what we're doing as a result of COVID, we've actually been using the Centre for I'm going to get it wrong, Community Investment Excellence impact measures, which have obviously been developed over the last couple of weeks. We're using those, and our senior management team are happy to receive those on a weekly basis as our main reporting mechanism, which allows us then to not only submit it to the centre, but also then use it internally and to our membership body. So that means that we're only having to collate one set of data rather than looking at similar information being sent to lots of different people in different formats.
Great, thank you. One of the questions I was going to ask, but I've kind of touched on there, so I'll maybe just skip to the next part, but I was kind of thinking about, just from other conversations, around how kind of the community responses kind of dovetail with the core operations. I suppose along the kind of how you're keeping all that information, kind of spoken a bit about that. I know from an earlier conversation, Rachel, you'd mentioned that the wellbeing calls had been done primarily by your community team. So, you know, is that something that we're aware of being done across the board? Do you think, I suppose, what kind of led to this was some of the community investment staff were staff who were furloughed, which seemed, I suppose, given that an area in which we could affect as housing association is through community response. I appreciate the difficulties with lockdown, but that seemed a slight surprise. And so, you know, kind of housing, you know, core operations, is that kind of business as normal, or is that kind of interlinked with the community investment response, would you say?
So I think I'm really passionate about ensuring that community investment, community regeneration is seen as a core business, and that we support core business and how we support core business. So right from the get-go, and in every position I've ever held, I've always ensured that we're linking all of our work back to core business and the bottom line. In terms of staff members being furloughed that work within Wales, I would say that hasn't really happened. Community teams have very much, we have quite a unique set of skills where we're sort of like jack of all trades, master of none, but the one thing we are really good at is talking to people. So that's why it was quite important for me, and I know my counterparts in other housing associations in Wales, that the community staff were the ones that were actually doing those outreach calls and making sure that our tenants were okay. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it kind of, that's basically how we've looked at it, and that's how it's been across the board in Wales.
I'll add to that by, I think, and it's a very good thing that all of our staff are learning that everyone is involved in community investment, and it's not some magical separate team, and that we all contribute towards investing in our communities. And I think it's been a really good thing for community investment in general, and for staff to start across the organisation to really appreciate as well that the impact that they can have. I think having the welfare calls is maybe helping people to understand their tenants a bit more, and different tenants to who they would previously maybe have engaged with. So I would say it's a positive, and in terms of enhancing the profile of community investment within an organisation and the importance of it and how it ties in with all other aspects of our housing organisations' activities.
Excellent, excellent. So I suppose, kind of aware of the kind of time, so in the kind of last 5 minutes, the other two questions I was kind of considering, you know, having a conversation about. I think Ruth might be quite good to lead on this, just with some of the stuff she spoke about earlier. But it was around two things, just basically framed around lockdown. One was with a kind of thought that lockdown might be lifted, might not be the end of that. You know, that if there's another spike, could there be another lockdown? relatively soon after, or perceived wisdom being we'll be in and out of social distancing for the next 12 months or so till there's a vaccination. Is there any kind of direct planned response to kind of coming out of lockdown? So thinking maybe digital provisions, so people who have been socially isolated, see if lockdown's only lifted for a week or so before, is there anything kind of short impact that we could provide to vulnerable tenants, particularly those self-isolating or being shielded, that would provide hardware and or kind of training? Or is that, do you think that's a more longer term vision? And the other thing I was thinking about was around a kind of exit strategy to community investment. I mean, from COVID response stuff, a housing association I spoke to had mentioned they had not been keen to promote or be involved in running a food bank previously. However, that's what the community needed just now. But when lockdown ends, is that something that you're able to walk away from? And is there any provisions been put in place for projects that you guys are doing just now that necessarily wouldn't be something you would do in future?
Well, as I said during my piece, we're certainly doing this is requiring an ongoing review of services. I don't think there will be an end point or a trying to guess when the lockdown is. We're just going to have to really use the evidence and our understanding that we're gaining through our contact with tenants and service users to really inform how our service is going to look in the future. They might look very different in many ways. Where we might have done things face-to-face is not going to be face-to-face anymore. We might be enhancing further our digital. We do have a digital participation officer, and we do things like laptop loan scheme, tablet, try before you buy. And obviously at Link Given Trust as well, we have seen the increasing amount of people looking for broadband support, mobile phone top-ups, trying to get data. But sometimes I think we have to know when it's other people's responsibilities to do that as well. And so, for example, we might have applications from someone who's like school age and they're trying to get work finished for school, but they're told they have to do it online. So I would say at that point, it's the school's responsibility rather than the housing provider to try and look at the digital provision. So I think there might be more of an issue that we could do as a housing association collective to talk about digital provision for social housing tenants where maybe the broadband uptake is a lot lower than in the general population.
Yeah, I would like to, I think this pandemic, COVID-19, changes everything for community regeneration. We don't know what things are going to look like at the other end. We certainly know that we will come out the other end, but for me, community regeneration investment work is going to be more important than ever. I do have a fear that we're creating a group of people that are very reliant on the existing services, and we'll have to look at doing some empowerment and trying to get these people to become a bit more resilient. And I think we would probably have to do that at a community setting, and I think that's where we're going to have to plan more of our projects and our services. And it's also looking at if social distancing is going to be here until at least the end of the year, if not into the following year, how do we deliver all our services and continue to do that? And it is, looking at digital, and we do have a digital inclusion team. We're lucky enough to have that just now. But going forward, how do we engage with these people and do it in a effective manner? Yeah, I think that's all up for a discussion to see what we do in the longer term, because I think it might come and go for the next couple of years if you listen to some of the health experts.
Yeah, similarly, we've been looking at sort of like the near future and then the distant future in terms of what we're going to do. But like both the ladies have just said, a lot more of our things are going to be less face-to-face, more contact. So, for example, our financial inclusion team, we have managed to, their capacity has increased by three times. They're being able to speak to 3 times as many individuals because they're not doing those face-to-face visits. They're actually doing it over the phone or doing it over video calls. And that has obviously meant that then we can help a lot more people. So I think one thing that I'm really pleased about in terms of this pandemic. If we'd actually tried to plan everyone working from home and everyone working remotely, it would have taken us about, well, it never would have happened. We'd still be talking about it in like 15 years, let's be honest. But because this has been forced upon us, it's meant that everyone has had to adapt, and there's not really that much of a choice, and it's actually pushed a lot more people to feel more confident with technology and see that you can actually work remotely. You can still have business as usual. As much as usual can happen in lockdown. So I think that's where we're going. We're even talking about, do we not get rid of our office, but do we change our office space so it's a social space rather than an office workspace, somewhere where you come to just meet with colleagues rather than somewhere you come to work. So there's lots of changes that we're going to be doing. In terms of something that we want to continue to do and roll out, just before, probably about 6 months before lockdown, we launched our library tablet loan scheme with one of our local authorities. Well, that was a bit of a mouthful. And what we've done is we've actually donated 2 iPads per library within that one local authority, and they are loaned out like books. So you're allowed to loan them out per like for 2 week periods, and they've got the SIM cards. Talking to other local authority partners, they're all very interested in having that rolled out as well. So that's something that we're definitely, we've seen that tech needs to be out there, more accessible, not just for our tenants, but for the wider community who may be in private rented and don't have access to that technology as well.
Great stuff, guys. Thank you very much. I think time-wise that makes a lot of sense to end there. But I do appreciate particularly the 3 of you guys for coming, and everybody else for watching. So thank you very much.